there, and welcome back to My Sister is Your Sister. This is Karen, and I am so happy to be here with you today. We have so much to talk about. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Why don't you grab your favorite beverage and sit a spell and do some sistering with us? We have so much to talk about, so much to share, and we hope that one of these days you'll be able to come and hang out with us on our podcast. Yes, you. Write us, say I want to come on the air, and let's do it. Well, let's get back to the program because Kelly's waiting for us. Hello and welcome back to My Sister is Your Sister. This is your host, Karen. Kelly is unable to be with us this week as she is crazy in life. So I am coming to you a little late, but I wanted to read. We've talked about this Lenny Kravitz book for several months, and I just really started reading it. And I think you're going to enjoy it. So I'm going to actually read you the foreword and the first chapter. It's called Let Love Rule, and it's by Lenny Kravitz and David Ritz. I can't breathe. Beneath the ground, the wooden casket I'm trapped in is being lowered deeper and deeper into the cold, dark earth. Fear overtakes me as I fall into a paralytic state. I can hear the dirt being shoveled over me. My heart pounds through my chest. I can't scream, and if I could, who would hear me? Just as the final shovel of soil is being packed tightly over me, I convulse right out of my nightmare into the sweat and urine-soaked bed of the small apartment on the island of Manhattan that my family calls home. Shaken and disorientated, I make my way out of the tiny black bedroom into the pitch dark living room where my mother and father sleep on the convertible couch. I stand at the foot of the bed, just staring, waiting. What kind of dream is this for a 5-year-old? What have I experienced to produce this kind of imaginary? It's 1969. The only violence I've seen is in cartoons of Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner on the 8-inch black and white screen of our Singer portable television. Mom senses my presence and awakens. What's wrong? I confess I've had a bad dream. She picks me up and carries me back to my bedroom. She quickly changes the sheets, brings in a warm washcloth, and wipes me down, and dresses me in fresh pajamas. She consoles me, and I drift back to sleep. This dream reoccurs countless times as years pass before I understand its true meaning. I know now that God was speaking to me. I believe the dream was telling me that life does not end in the grave. There's something beyond, something eternal, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to go back to the beginning of my journey. Manhattan and Brooklyn. Greenwich Village, 1963. On the small bandstand of a cellar jazz club where the air is thick with smoke and the lights are low, John Coltrane commands his rhythm section. With the gentle nod of his head, he sets his aching slow groove. Elvin Jones effortlessly works his whisper quiet brushes. McCoy Tyner plays a subtle piano intro, and bassist Jimmy Garrison provides a gentle heartbeat. Then Coltrane, breathing deeply, exhales into his horn. The sound of his tenor sax is startling, rich, lush, and sultry. At the corner table, a self-assured Jewish man looks into the eyes of a beguiling Afro-Caribbean woman. She's my mother, Roxy Roker, and he's my dad, Cy Kravitz. Dad's a 39-year-old journalist, producer of the NBC News at 30 Rockefeller Center in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. Years before, he started out as a page in the same building before working his way up. He's a self-starter, a former Army Green Beret who saw action in the Korean War. He's also a member of the reserves. His parents, Joe and Jean Kravitz, live in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, with many other Jews of Russian descent. Dad's divorced with 2 daughters. He lives alone in a $350 a month 1-bedroom apartment at 5 East 82nd Street, just off Central Park on the Upper East Side. A graduate of New York University, he's a sharp dresser and a consummate charmer. He loves music, especially jazz and theater. He has an artistic side, but it's overpowered by the order and discipline. It's at 30 Rock where he meets Roxy Roker, age 34. My mom is soulful, deeply elegant person, an Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority member and a drama major. She graduated from Howard University with honors before studying at the Shakespeare Institute at Stratford upon Avon and joining a theater company in Copenhagen. She performs in off Broadway productions and supports herself working as an assistant to a high ranking NBC boss. She's the ultimate executive secretary, efficient, graceful in every manner. She has inherited the work ethic of her parents. Her Bahamian father and a self made man and her Georgia born mother, who works as a domestic, own the home where she was raised in Bedford Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. Roxy has never dated a white man before, but it's not my father's skin color that bothers her. It's the fact that they work in the same office. She's also a little uneasy knowing he's been married and divorced, and the fact he doesn't seem very close to his daughters. She's skeptical about his nature. Dad takes mom to Broadway revival of The Crucible. They catch Thelonious Monk at the Five Spot. They see Alvin Ailey at the City Center. They hear Langston Hughes read at the 92nd Street Y. Cy and Roxy are kindred spirits. He's determined to win her affection. You see, now that he's found the most beguiling woman in New York City, Cy is confident. Roxy's intrigued and flattered by all the attention. She's delighted to have someone trek downtown to see her act in an avant-garde play. She's taken by his enthusiasm and his perseverance, qualities that her own father taught her to appreciate. Mom has dreams and ambitions. She is the bright young star, a talented, trained actress, and a person of passion and poise. She struggles and later insists that Cy reach out to his two daughters and reconnect with them. For her, it's a deal breaker. He agrees, and despite his trepidation, a bond is forged. In an alchemical way, Cy and Roxy's dreams meld. They fall head over heels. He proposes. The next night, my mom goes to the Cafe Carlisle on Madison Avenue to consult with her dear buddy, Bobby Short, the iconic cabaret singer and pianist. What does he think about her marrying Cy? In his grand manner, Short responds, "Well, I don't see anyone else asking." The wedding is humble affair. The dad's parents, heartbroken that their son is marrying a black woman, and gentle and a Gentile to boot. Oh, Lord. They refuse to attend. It takes my birth to bring them around. I love knowing that without doing a thing except existing, I bring peace to my family. Gemini. I am deeply two sided, black and white, Jewish and Christian, Manhattanese and Brooklynite. My young life was all about opposites and extremes. As a kid, you take everything in stride. So I accepted my Gemini soul. I owned it. In fact, I adored it. Yins and yangs mingled in various parts of my heart and mind, giving my life balance and fueling my curiosity, giving me comfort. Though nightmares haunted me throughout my childhood, once I was awake, I was ready to go. Awake and alive, looking to explore, looking for adventure. Many people remember their early years filled with trauma. Despite the drama and dysfunction, I will regale you with my story is not born out of darkness. My youth was filled with joy, and I was surrounded by what felt like endless conditional love. From my mother, from a dozen glamorous godmothers, from grandparents, from neighbors, all who felt like aunts and uncles, from sisters and cousins and friends who became my chosen family. My father cared for me deeply as well, but it took me a while to realize it. He didn't know how to show me affection, and our relationship was strained because we were so different. He lived in a framework of extreme discipline. I ran free. I was born messy and feral, like most other little kids. Dad hated clutter and would scold me at the sight of a single toy left on the floor. The thing is, The discipline never took. He was stubborn, and so was I. That quality we share. I had kind of a rambunctious will that couldn't be locked down. He had the kind of authority that couldn't be challenged. Dad and I worked towards deeply disparate goals with equal fervor. Our difference would only deepen as time went on. It is only in recent years that I have begun to understand our incredible similarities. I'm so grateful for this place in my life. He never ran out on me. He was there at critical times, offering me critical help. Our impasses were epic, but as a result, I grew stronger. I simply would not be who I am without those power struggles. As ugly as our battles became, they were an education. I had to go through I had to go through dad to become me. Mom was and is my heart. It was mom who hung the poster over my bed that read, "War is not healthy for children and other living things." It was also mom who painted the peace sign on my cheek and proudly walked me through anti-war marches in Central Park. Naturally, I didn't get the political implications, but I loved the excitement of the crowd singing "Give Peace a Chance." I felt like I was in the midst of an important moment. I felt protected by the goodness that radiated from mom without her even having to try. Her first form of protection was to make sure I knew who and where I was in the most physical sense. To do that, she taught me my very first song. It had the sweetest melody I'd sing. Leonard Albert Kravitz is my name, and I live at 5 East 82nd Street in New York City, and I live at 36-8 Throop Avenue with my grandma in Brooklyn. Looking back, the song has more depth than I realized. In it, two-sided nature of my childhood, twin worlds, twin identities. I was happy in both. Both formed me. I'm not sure how or why I could so easily slip in and out of the starkly diverse cultures and yet remain confident in my own skin. But I could. I believe this intense adaptability gave me the freedom to be happy anywhere. Half a century later, I am still grateful. Let me paint you a picture. In Manhattan, our apartment at 5 East 82nd Street was on the third floor of a once grand 5-story home, chopped up into a dozen modest units. In the 60s, you can still find affordable housing on the now exclusive Upper East Side. Our building modeled on the turn of the century Parisian Beaux Arts architecture. It was a monument to faded glory. Wrought iron decorated glass doors, carved cherubs, and the ornate lobby set off the sweeping marble staircase with tiny European elevator. Set in the back of the building, our compact apartment looked out onto brick walls. No view. The living room was small dining area and a spinet piano. There were shelves filled with jazz records and books like James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain and Sammy Davis Jr. Yes, I Can. Off to the side was a silver galley kitchen. There was no pull-out couch. There was also a pull-out couch where my parents slept. They gave me the one and only bedroom that made me feel special. It also allowed mom and dad to give parties that would interfere with my sleep. My parents had a huge network of fascinating friends whom they loved entertaining at our place. My room was filled with all the stuffed little boys like Hot Wheels, model planes, Frankenstein, the Wolfman figures, and the best of all, a plastic record player. Football legend Joe Namath lived across the street. Sometimes he'd throw a ball around with us kids, and only a few steps away at the end of our block stood the mighty Metropolitan Museum of Art, like a fortress commanding the eastern border of Central Park. Although our place was small, most of the kids in the neighborhood lived in enormous apartments. It was a world of privilege. In contrast to all of that, I didn't see much privilege in Brooklyn. Mom's parents lived across the East River in mostly black Bedford Stuyvesant. My early life was a dance between the two boroughs. I felt I belonged in both places, and the truth is, I did. My education Oh, Lord Jesus. My education began at a nursery school in Brooklyn called the Junior Academy. So all week long, I'd stay with mom's parents who owned a 3-story home in the corner of Throop Avenue and Cojuco Street, in the heart of Bed-Stuy. On Friday afternoons, my parents would pick me up on their. I'm going to stop right there. I've not had enough coffee kick in. So we are finishing today I'm going to actually finish this page and we're continue it coming soon. My life in Brooklyn was grounded by two phenomenal human beings, my maternal grandparents, Albert and Bessie Roker. They showed me their only grandchild with love. Born on a small remote island of Ingawa in the Bahamas, Grandpa was forced to become a man of the house at age 9 when his father died and left 4 children to care for his ailing wife. Grandpa didn't have electricity or ice until his teens. Eventually, he made his way to Miami, where Georgia-born Southern belle Bessie was working in an ice cream parlor. They fell in love, married, and migrated north to New York in search of a better life. The world has never seen a harder worker than Albert Roker, doing 4 jobs at once. Grandpa, a house painter, a doorman, a handyman, and a manual laborer at a factory where he wound up as a foreman. He always spent less than he earned and managed his money with an eye towards his family's well-being and his daughter's education. Grandpa used to talk about a vision that came to him as a kid. When he grew up, he'd never refuse anything his wife or child asked him. The answer, he decided, would never be no, and it never was. Albert loved learning. Completely self-educated, he knew the Bible. He quoted Shakespeare, Socrates, and Malcolm X. He devoured whole books in a single night. He was driven to improve his mind. He also did all that he could to expose his daughter to important culture. When my mother was 13, Grandpa took her to the theater to see Porgy and Bess, where they were forced to sit in a section for colored only. Despite the irony, the musical featuring Black performers performed to the audience where Blacks were given second-class treatment. The production triggered by mother's interest in theater. Her father's prudent management of money put her through Howard University. On Sunday mornings, Grandpa dressed me in a suit and tie, and off we went to in his Cadillac to Lincoln Center, where at Avery Fisher Hall, Dr. Irvin Seal presided at the Non-Denominational Church of Truth. In his sermons, Dr. Seal praised the great teachers and prophets, Buddha, Jesus, and Moses. Grandpa read all of Dr. Seal's books, whose titles, 10 Words That Will Change Your Life and The Success in You, reflected his code of self-improvement as spiritual revolution. Though his compass was not exactly the same as mine would become, his sermons were an introduction to these concepts and an invitation to start forming my own connection to the unknown. For all my father's powers and passions, devotion to God was not one. Grandpa was my guiding light for all that and more. He also was a surrogate father to dozens of neighborhood boys. He took the kids bowling, drove them to the countryside to play golf, and got them tickets to museums and Broadway plays. He made sure they had library cards. He showed them how to apply to trade school and college. Grandpa saw life as an opportunity for self-improvement at every turn. The great thing about him, though, was that he didn't see it as an opportunity for just himself, but for everyone, especially kids who lacked resources. Grandpa became the resource for the entire neighborhood. He was also a disciplinarian, but with a style so different from my dad's. If I was mischievous, Grandpa sat me down and, like a psychologist, explained how my bad behavior was hurting me more than anyone else. He droned on and on and on. He wanted me to understand why I'd done what I had done, so that I could identify the problem and resolve it. The whole process was agonizing. I would have preferred a beating, but thank God he had the insight and patience, and his approach was invaluable. Grandpa had a Bahamian Sidney Poitier-style accent. Grandma spoke with a slight Georgia drawl and attended a Methodist church. If he was If he was intellect, she was my soul. My grandmother was the love of my life, a full bodied woman who loved her southern fried cooking. Bessie possessed a God given ability to read people right. When Grandpa went off on a philosophical rant, she'd look at him and say, Albert, please. Back then, Bed Stuy was a village, a community comprised of relocated people who, like Grandma, hailed from down south, or like Grandpa, the Caribbean. It felt safe. When I think of Bed Stuy, I think of Mother Sister, Ruby Dee's character in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, who watches over the neighborhood from her window. He had mother sisters everywhere. And my if my grandmother was at work and one of my mother sisters caught me doing wrong, she'd discipline me right then and there. Then she'd tell my grandma, which means I'd get my ass whooped a second time. My grandmother was so protective of me and loved me so much that even if I got in trouble for a good reason, she would defend me. She'd deny I'd done it with every fiber of her being. And then, in private, she'd tear my behind up for what I'd done. Punishment was not to teach. Oop. Punishment was to teach, not to shame. So she wasn't going to let anybody embarrass me. Still, her anger never lasted long. By evening, I'd be cuddled up in her bed, the two of us watching I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, or her favorite, The Lawrence Welk Show. Life with my grandparents in Bed Stuy was not only its own distinctive universe, but I was a whole other person there with a whole other name. This came about because so many of our neighbors came from down south. Down south was the term everyone used until I learned otherwise. I thought down south was the name of an actual city. Most of the transplanted Southerners retained their drawls. When I met Poppy Branch, the kid next door who had just moved from down south, his sister Renee asked me, What's your name? Lenny? Eddie. I said, Lenny. Oh, yeah, Eddie. I gave up, and just like that, I became Eddie throughout Brooklyn. In Manhattan, I was Lenny with an IE, as I used to spell it. And in Brooklyn, I was Eddie. My Gemini ass was pleased. The streets excited me. This was a time, the late 60s and early 70s, when Bed-Stuy had not yet become a war zone. There was crime and scattered violence, but elders were still treated and own. My bad, I double turned. With respect, no matter what kind of deal was going down. If my grandfather walked by, he was greeted with, Good afternoon, Mr. Roker. If my grandmother was walking home from the supermarket with an armful of groceries, the boys would insist on carrying them for her. I loved the characters strolling the sidewalk, sporting their finest tailor-mades, hand-sewn gabardine slacks by the man who ran the dark cleaners. He was a big deal. He was hip, and there were lots of platform shoes, gold chains, and blown out afros. My buddy lived in an apartment with paint peeling off the walls and cracked linoleum rolling up off the floors. We sat on milk crates and drank Kool-Aid out of jelly jars. Yet the places were full of life and love. No matter where I went, I was family. My friends' mothers treated me like their son, and there was always an extra plate of chicken, red beans, and rice to be had. The soundtrack of Bed Dewey was soul. Music was always in the air. James Brown endlessly spinning on someone's turntable. Certain songs stuck with me. Miss Maudie Osborne, who rented the third floor from my grandparents, loved to listen to Fontanella Bass's Rescue Me while she drank her blues away. Not sure anyone ever did rescue her, but I sure did love the song. The sights and sounds of Bed-Stuy, boom boxes, block parties, men crowded around, tiny transistor radios blasting Mets and Yankees game, salsa music pulsating through apartment buildings, mainly populated by Puerto Ricans, clothes hanging on lines across alleys, girls jumping double dutch in front of bodegas where we bought miniature bottle rockets, put them on the ground, set them aflame, and with giddy satisfaction, watch them take off after pedestrians. Thus the nickname. Oh, that was my bad boy mode. And we're going to stop here for today, but I am totally digging this. You'll have to excuse me. I get so into it, and then I I just screwed up that name. Again, we're listening to Let Love Rule by Lenny Kravitz and David Ritz. It is his story and how he became the Lenny Kravitz that we all adore and lust over in his videos. I'm going to say thank you right now, and I am going to get this posted so you all can hear it. I will see you soon. And again, this is Karen from Your Sister. Well, my sister is your sister. If you want, your sister could be my sister too. Have a great day, and God bless.
Thanks for joining us on another episode where my sister is your sister. I'm Kelly, here with my sister Karen. Don't forget to subscribe and share wherever you listen to your podcasts. Take care of you and your sister.